Hi, let's talk about how you can modify shape layers. When you add a rectangle or an ellipse to your canvas, you'll get this panel. We've already covered it, but you may have recognized these icons from the marquee tools. Let me activate it so you can compare the two. As you can see, they're very similar. These icons look almost the same. And if we try to use our modifier keys, you'll see these tools behave the same way. If I hold Shift after I start dragging, I'll constrain my aspect ratio, thus I'll end up with a perfect square. Okay, we've covered that previously. But if I use Shift before I drag and I have a shape layer selected, you'll notice my cursor will change. It's now going to have this plus symbol next to it. This means I'll add to my existing shape. Check the Layers panel to confirm this is the case. As you can see, no new layer has shown up. Instead, it got merged with the initial one that was selected. And the story continues exactly like with the marquee tool. Hold Alt and you can remove parts of this shape. Notice the minus symbol. But if you click and drag, and then you hold Alt, it will expand your layer on both sides at an equal rate. So if I drag towards the left side and I add Alt into the mix, the right side will grow just as much. Remember what Shift and Alt did together? They gave us the intersection between selections. Here, it's the same effect and it targets the old shape and the new one. Not that useful in everyday projects, but it may help you out in rare cases. I'll move to the Ellipse tool so I can remind you what we talked about in the lecture about the elliptical marquee. It was very useful because we could create and expand a selection based on the point of origin. Here, with our ellipse, we have the same thing. I'll click and drag from this top left corner of my canvas. If I hold Shift, I'll get a perfect circle. But if I also use Alt, this will expand my shape from where I initially clicked, and that was here. Great stuff so far. A good thing to know is that the Merge command, Ctrl-E, doesn't rasterize shape layers. You'll get one layer, but it will still retain its shape properties. Let me show you how that works. I'll add a rectangle on my canvas. I'll make it red. Above it, I'll have another one. This time I'll choose a green colour. I'll now use Ctrl-E and they'll combine into a new layer. Notice the colour. The new shape is green. If we undo and swap their positions in the Layers panel, you'll find out how this works. Merge them again. So when you're combining two shapes, the one that's higher in the Layers panel will determine the new shape's colour. Here, because the red one was above it, we're now looking at a red shape. What's cool is that they're still live shapes. I'll get the Path Selection tool, meaning the black arrow, and I'll click on this one. We can see the corner radius is activated. Input any values and hit Enter. That's fantastic, so even though they're now a single layer, you can still target their individual corner radiuses. But here's the thing. If you hold Shift and click on the second one, now you have both selected. Go to the Options bar and click on this icon. Here we have all the commands we covered. Shift combines shapes, Alt subtracts. Shift and Alt creates an intersection, but that's not important. Instead, we'll click on this Merge Shape Components and we'll get this error. By hitting OK, we're saying we no longer want them to be treated as live shapes. Instead, they'll be converted to regular shape layers. That means they'll still have vector properties, but you won't have nearly as many options in the Properties panel. As you can see, this is much more restrictive. Let me create another rectangle on the canvas and I'll show you another thing. If you get the white arrow, so the Direct Selection tool, and you drag an anchor point, you'll get the same warning. You'll transform it into a regular path, meaning you'll lose all those great settings. Why would you do that? Well, this is useful when you want to create all sorts of irregular shapes that Photoshop doesn't offer by default. So you'd use all sorts of easy-to-understand shapes and merge them together until you create something totally different. And that's how you can modify your shape layers, through the Properties panel, by using your modifier keys, or with the help of the Direct Selection tool. Okay, let's continue.